Time to feed the fish, old man, Rachel sneered, her voice laced with malice as she shoved me into the dark waters of Chesapeake Bay. My son Michael simply watched, a twisted grin on his lips, as if he were enjoying a macabre show. Their inheritance scheme was disturbingly straightforward: eliminate me, and the $1. 8 billion would be theirs. But as I sank beneath the surface, fighting against the cold grip of betrayal, I realized that this was only the beginning. I would rise from the depths, armed with the truth, and I would make them pay for their betrayal. They say blood is always closer, but what happens when your own blood tries to kill you? Comment and let me know how you feel now. Let me back up and tell you how a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon led to me plummeting into the cold waters of Chesapeake Bay. I suppose I should have seen it coming. But at 69, I still believed that family meant something. That blood was thicker than seawater, if you will. The day had started beautifully. Michael had called me personally, not through his secretary, which should have been my first red flag. He invited me for what he called a celebration cruise on his new yacht. "Dad, we want to toast your recovery from the surgery," he'd said, his voice warm with what I mistook for genuine affection. Just the three of us, like a real family. I'd been recovering from my knee replacement for 8 weeks, and honestly, I was desperate for any sign that my son and his wife Rachel still wanted me in their lives. Since my wife Patricia died 3 years ago, leaving me with my tech company fortune, things had felt different between us. Colder, more distant. So I dressed carefully that afternoon in my navy blazer, the one Patricia always said brought out my eyes, and took a cab to the marina. The yacht was magnificent, a gleaming white vessel that probably cost more than most people's houses. Michael greeted me at the dock with an embrace that felt rehearsed, while Rachel watched from the upper deck, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Isn't she beautiful?" Michael asked, gesturing to the boat. 45 feet of pure luxury. We're thinking of taking her down to the Caribbean next month. What he didn't mention was that they'd bought it with money I'd given them last year to invest in Michael's consulting firm. $3 million that I was beginning to suspect had never seen the inside of any business account. The first hour was pleasant enough. We sailed into calm waters, the Maryland coastline growing smaller behind us. Rachel served champagne and talked about their plans to renovate the house. My old house, which I'd signed over to them after Patricia died, because I thought downsizing to the condo would be simpler. But then Michael started asking questions. Casual ones at first, about my will, about the trust arrangements, about whether I'd considered making changes to simplify things for them. "It's just that probate can be so complicated, Dad," he said, refilling my champagne glass with a little too much enthusiasm. "We want to make sure everything's taken care of." That's when I noticed Rachel filming me with her phone. Not openly, but holding it at an angle while pretending to take selfies. Getting me on camera while I was drinking. While I was talking about financial matters. Building some kind of evidence. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The surgery I'd had. They'd insisted on handling all my paperwork afterward. The power of attorney documents they'd brought to the hospital, claiming it was just temporary, just to help with bills while I recovered. The way my financial advisor had stopped returning my calls. "Michael," I said carefully, setting down my glass, "I'd like to go back to shore now." That's when his mask slipped completely. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Dad." His voice was different now, harder, colder than the wind coming off Chesapeake Bay. "See, we need to have a conversation about your health, about your memory issues," Rachel added. Stepping closer to where I sat, memory issues, I was sharper than both of them combined. "You've been showing signs of dementia, Dad," Michael continued. "We have it documented. The doctors agree that you're no longer capable of managing your financial affairs." "That's absurd," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized how carefully they'd orchestrated this. The boat was miles from shore. No other vessels in sight, just the three of us, the ocean, and their plan. "We're trying to help you," Michael said, but his eyes were cold as winter. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." I stood up slowly, my knee still aching from the surgery, but my mind crystal clear. "And if I refuse," that's when Rachel smiled, really smiled, for the first time all day. "Well, elderly man, recent surgery, probably took too many pain medications, got disoriented on the boat." She shrugged. "Tragic accidents happen all the time. I'd raised this man from diapers, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college education, his wedding, his house, and now he was standing there nodding along while his wife threatened my life. You're both insane if you think you'll get away with this. Actually, Dad, we've thought it through pretty carefully, Michael said, pulling out a folder of papers. Your signature here, transferring all assets to us immediately for your own protection, and we all go home happy. I looked at the documents, at my son's expectant face, at Rachel's phone still recording. Then I looked at the ocean, vast and dangerous, and somehow less frightening than the two people who were supposed to love me. Go to hell, I said. That's when it happened. Rachel moved behind me and whispered those words about feeding the fish. The push wasn't violent. They were too smart for that. Just a sudden shove when I was off balance. Looking out at the water, over I went, navy blazer and all, into the cold Atlantic waters of Chesapeake Bay. The water was shockingly cold. I broke the surface gasping, just in time to see the yacht speeding away. They were actually leaving me there to die. I'm a decent swimmer. Patricia and I used to do laps together every morning, but the cold shocked my system, and my clothes were dragging me down. I kicked off my shoes and fought to stay afloat, watching the yacht disappear into the distance. That's when I spotted the fishing boat. Captain Frank Miller was exactly the kind of man who'd jump into action to save a drowning stranger. 63 years old, weathered from decades on the water, and possessed of the kind of moral compass that seemed to be missing from my own family tree. Jesus Christ, what happened to you? He asked as he and his deckhand hauled me aboard their vessel. I was shivering uncontrollably, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely speak. Frank wrapped me in a blanket that smelled of salt and diesel fuel while his crew started the engine. My family. I managed between chattering teeth. The yacht, we saw them take off like a bat out of hell, Frank said grimly. Didn't look back once. What kind of people leave someone floating in the middle of Chesapeake Bay? The kind who inherit $1.8 billion if I'm not around to stop them. I thought, but out loud, I just said, the kind who aren't really family. As we headed toward shore, I made a decision that surprised even me. Wait, I said, grabbing Frank's arm. Please don't let them know you found me. Not yet. Frank studied my face with sharp eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize when someone was running from more than just cold water. You in some kind of trouble? Yes, but not the kind you're thinking. I took a shaky breath. I need to get to shore without anyone knowing I survived. Can you help me? Frank looked at me for a long moment, then keyed his radio. Coast Guard. This is the Mary Catherine. False alarm on that debris sighting. All clear. Frank took me to his sister's bed and breakfast in Annapolis. Dorothy Miller was a no-nonsense woman who didn't ask questions about cash-paying guests with wet clothes and wild stories about murderous family members. Long as you're not bringing trouble to my door, you're welcome, she said, handing me dry clothes and hot coffee. The next morning, I began watching them. Michael and Rachel weren't grieving. They were celebrating. I followed them to Harbor East, where they spent 3 hours shopping for luxury items. Rachel bought a $5,000 handbag while Michael picked out a Rolex. They had lunch at Charleston, the kind of restaurant that requires reservations weeks in advance, laughing and toasting with champagne. These weren't the actions of people who just lost a family member in a tragic boating accident. But on the third day, I saw something that stopped my heart. Rachel was carrying a baby, a tiny newborn, maybe 3 weeks old, wrapped in an expensive blanket. She brought the child into my old house like she belonged there, which technically she did. Michael and Rachel had never mentioned having a baby. 6 months ago, Rachel told me they were too career-focused for children. I waited until they left, then used my old key to slip inside. The house felt wrong. Patricia's sewing room had been converted into a nursery with thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Top-tier crib, designer changing table, imported rocking chair. On the dresser, I found a birth certificate that made my hands shake. Baby Locke, born 3 weeks ago. Mother Rachel Locke, father Michael Locke. Impossible. I'd seen Rachel on that yacht 4 days ago. She definitely wasn't recovering from recent childbirth. This document was completely fabricated. Behind the baby formula, I found a folder marked Whitmore Services. The paperwork inside told a horrifying story. Whitmore Reproductive Services specialized in private adoptions for wealthy clients. Michael and Rachel had arranged to purchase this baby 8 months ago, paying cash for complete discretion. The birth mother was listed only as Subject 17, a 17-year-old girl with no family. A girl who, according to the medical reports, had died during delivery from unexpected complications. They'd killed a teenage mother to steal her baby. As I photographed the documents, I heard car doors outside. They were coming home. I grabbed the evidence and headed for the back door, but Rachel's voice stopped me cold. She was on the phone in the kitchen. No, everything's perfect. She was saying, the old man's dead, the baby's legally ours, and we'll have full access to the inheritance within 6 weeks. Your fee will be transferred once probate clears. Someone else was involved. Someone who'd orchestrated this entire operation. Someone they owed money to. I slipped out the back door as quietly as I'd entered, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about two greedy kids stealing their father's money. This was bigger, more organized, professional. Back at Dorothy's bed and breakfast, I spread the photographs across the kitchen table. Frank looked over my shoulder, his weathered face growing darker with each document. So they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broke kids with a living father? Frank said when I finished explaining. It's worse than that, I replied, pointing to the Whitmore documents. They're part of something bigger. Someone's running an operation, and my son and daughter-in-law are just customers. What's he do, Tina? What are you going to do? I looked at the photos of that innocent baby, at the forged birth certificate, at the medical report documenting a 17-year-old girl's suspicious death. I'm going to find out who's really behind this, I said, and then I'm going to destroy them all. I needed professional help to identify the voice on that phone call. Dorothy Miller surprised me by pulling out a business card from her kitchen drawer. My nephew, Danny Crawford, she said, former police detective, now private investigator. He owes me a favor. Danny arrived that evening looking exactly like Central Casting would order for a PI. Mid-40s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much. So let me understand this, he said after hearing my story. Your son tried to kill you for money, and now you want me to find out who's helping him. I showed him the photographs from the house, the Whitmore documents, everything I'd gathered. Danny studied the papers with professional interest. This handwriting looks familiar, he said, pointing to a signature on one of the contracts. Mind if I run this through some databases? 24 hours later, he had answers that chilled me to the bone. Her name is Susan Clark, Danny said, spreading surveillance photos across Dorothy's kitchen table. She runs a very specialized law practice. Estate planning for families who want to accelerate their inheritance timeline. The photo showed a professional woman in her late 40s, auburn hair, expensive suit. She looked like someone's trusted attorney, which I suppose she was. What kind of acceleration? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. The permanent kind. Susan Clark has been systematically targeting wealthy elderly people across Maryland and Virginia. She identifies families with inheritance motives, then offers them a complete service package. Danny pulled out more documents, death certificates, medical reports, financial records. She provides fake medical documentation showing mental decline, arranges for power of attorney transfers, and when necessary, organizes convenient accidents. In exchange, she takes 30 to 40% of the estate. How many people are we talking about? I've identified 15 confirmed cases over the past 4 years. All wealthy seniors, all with greedy relatives, all dead under suspicious circumstances that were never properly investigated. I felt nauseated. She's been doing this for years. She's got the system figured out. Corrupt medical examiners who rule deaths natural or accidental, probate judges who fast-track estate settlements, even police contacts who discourage deeper investigations. Danny showed me financial records. Your son and daughter-in-law signed a contract agreeing to pay Susan Clark 40% of your $1.8 billion estate. That's over $700 million for arranging your death. And the baby, part of her standard package, she maintains relationships with several private adoption services that cater to wealthy clients who want no questions asked. The teenage mothers often have tragic complications during delivery. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so horrifying I could barely process it. Susan Clark is running a murder for inheritance business, I said. Exactly. And she's very good at it. No direct involvement, perfect legal cover, and a network of corrupt officials to ensure nothing gets investigated too closely. What happens when she finds out I'm still alive? Danny's expression darkened. She has a cleaner, someone who handles problems that need to disappear permanently. If Susan Clark realizes her plan failed, she'll send him after you, me, and anyone else who knows too much. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. 15 murdered seniors, a 17-year-old girl dead in childbirth, my own son, who'd sold his soul for money. Then we need to stop her before she realizes I survived. How do you propose we do that? I thought about baby Thomas, sleeping peacefully in his expensive crib, unaware that his birth mother had been murdered to provide him to killers. I thought about the other families Susan Clark had destroyed, the elderly people who died alone and afraid. We're going to give her exactly what she wants. I said, a meeting with her supposedly dead client? That's insane. Maybe, but it's also the only way to get evidence of what she's really doing, and the only way to make sure she never kills anyone else. Danny Crawford had been holding back information, and I was about to find out why. There's something I haven't told you, he said the next morning, pulling out an FBI badge from his wallet. I'm not just a private investigator. I'm Agent Danny Crawford, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I stared at the badge, then at his face. You've been investigating Susan Clark. For 18 months, we've been tracking her operation across 3 states, but she's too careful, never directly involved in the murders, always has plausible deniability, until now. What's different about now? You survived, for the first time. We have a living witness who can testify about her methods, but more importantly, we can use you to get her to confess on tape. Frank Miller, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, shook his head. You want to use Adrian as bait? It's the only way to get evidence that will stick in court. Danny said, Susan Clark is smart, but she's also arrogant. If she thinks she's talking to a dead man, she might reveal enough to incriminate herself. I looked at the surveillance photos still spread across Dorothy's table. 15 murdered seniors, a teenage mother dead in childbirth, my own son, who'd become a customer in this horror show. What would I have to do? We set up a meeting. You confront Michael and Rachel. Let them think you've come back for revenge. When Susan Clark shows up to clean up the mess, we record everything she says. And if she decides to have me killed on the spot, Danny's expression was grim. We'll have FBI agents positioned around the location, but I won't lie to you. There's significant risk involved. I thought about baby Thomas, sleeping in that nursery bought with blood money, about the 17-year-old girl whose only crime was being poor and pregnant, about all the other families Susan Clark would destroy if we didn't stop her. When do we do it? Are you sure about this? Frank asked. These people already tried to kill you once. That's exactly why I'm sure. I said, Susan Clark has been murdering innocent people for years. My son and daughter-in-law are accessories to murder. And there's a baby whose mother died to provide him to killers. Danny nodded approvingly. We'll need a few days to set everything up. Recording equipment, surveillance positions, backup plans. Susan Clark can't suspect this is anything other than a family confrontation gone wrong. How do we get her to come? Simple. You appear at your old house when Michael and Rachel are there. They'll panic and call her immediately. Susan Clark will have to come personally to assess the damage and figure out how to eliminate the problem. Which is me, which is you. But this time, every word she says will be recorded by federal agents. And there will be enough firepower around that house to stop a small army. I looked out Dorothy's kitchen window at Chesapeake Bay, where this whole nightmare had started just a week ago. A week ago. I'd been a trusting father who believed family meant something. Now I was planning to bring down a criminal organization that had murdered dozens of innocent people. There's one more thing, I said. That baby, what happens to him when this is over? Danny's expression softened. That's up to the courts. But given the circumstances, if you wanted to petition for custody, I nodded. Someone needed to make sure Thomas grew up knowing the truth about his brave young mother. Someone needed to make sure he understood that real family isn't about blood or money. It's about choosing to protect the innocent, even when it puts your own life at risk. Let's do it, I said. Let's bring them all down. After discussing with Danny, we prepared for the final confrontation at my old house. I hadn't returned since I faked my death, and emotions surged as I thought about the memories within those walls. We need to create a scenario where Susan won't suspect anything, Danny said while setting up the recording equipment. She has to believe this is just a normal family meeting. I nodded, feeling the tension in the air. We had meticulously planned every detail for the day, from timing to the approach. Even what I would say. Adrian, Danny said, there are a few rules you need to remember when Susan arrives. Stay calm. Don't let her see you're stronger than she expects. She'll try to distract you. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was at stake. I had prepared for this moment for days. But now, as the time approached, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Frank arrived with his truck, becoming my protector and driver for this operation. "I'll stay outside to keep in contact," he said. "If anything goes wrong, I'll intervene." We had planned for Frank to be at a safe distance, but close enough to jump in if needed. I had also informed Dorothy that I would return and set a time for her to call the police if she didn't hear from me within a certain time frame. The morning of the confrontation, I couldn't eat. I sat on the sofa in the kitchen, feeling time drag on. Finally, when the clock struck 11 a.m., I knew it was time. "Are you ready?" Danny asked, looking at me with reassuring eyes. "Absolutely," I replied, donning the suit I had saved from better days, though it felt a bit tight. It reminded me of the man I used to be, someone who faced challenges head on. We drove to my old house, where Michael and Rachel would be waiting inside. My heart raced at the thought of confronting them again. Just a week ago, I had been a trusting father who believed family meant something. Now, I was plotting to dismantle a criminal organization responsible for numerous innocent deaths. "Let's do this," I said, determination filling my voice. When we arrived, I saw Michael's car parked out front. I glanced at Danny, who nodded, and I stepped out of the vehicle. "Time to face them," I murmured, feeling a mix of resolve and fear. As I approached the front door of my old home, memories flooded back, both joyful and painful. But this time, I wasn't just a father returning home. I was a man on a mission to reclaim my life and protect a child who deserved a real family. I took a deep breath as I stood at the front door of my old house, the very place I had once considered a sanctuary. Now it felt like the stage for a dark drama, and I was the unwilling actor stepping into the spotlight. When I opened the door, the familiar scent of wood polish and old memories hit me like a wave. Everything looked the same, yet it felt foreign. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest, every nerve ending alive with anticipation and fear. "Just act normal," I reminded myself, though I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I wasn't just walking into my home, I was walking into a trap that had been set for me, a confrontation that could change everything. Rachel was the first to notice me. She stood in the living room, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Dad," she stammered, her eyes wide as if she were seeing a ghost. Michael appeared behind her, his mouth dropping open in disbelief. "I thought you were dead," he blurted out, but there was no sympathy in his tone, only fear. "I am very much alive," I replied, letting the words hang in the air like a weight, "and I have a few things to discuss with you both." Just then, the doorbell rang, and I knew it was Susan Clark. I could feel the tension in the room spike, a palpable electricity that crackled in the air. Michael shot Rachel a glance, and they both knew they were cornered. "Answer it," I said, my voice steady. "Let's get this over with." Rachel glanced at me, her bravado faltering. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You've been planning my murder and stealing my money. I have evidence of everything, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." As Rachel moved to the door, I positioned myself strategically in the living room, ensuring I had a clear view of everything. I could hear the click of the door latch, the faint creak as it swung open. Susan stood there looking impeccably professional as always, her expression a mask of calm. "Hello, Michael?" "Rachel," she greeted, stepping inside as if she owned the place. "I'm so sorry to hear about your father. I trust he's been taken care of." I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm right here, Susan, and I'm not going anywhere." Her gaze snapped to me, surprise flitting across her face before it hardened into a cold smile. "Adrian, I wasn't expecting you to join us. I thought you were indisposed." "Nice try," I shot back, my voice firm. "You're not going to get away with this." The tension in the room thickened, and I could see the gears turning in Susan's mind as she quickly assessed the situation. "We can talk about this rationally," she said, her tone dripping with feigned concern. "You don't need to get upset. I'm here to help you." "Help me," I laughed, a bitter sound. "You've been orchestrating everything from the start. You think I would trust you after what you've done?" "I think you're in over your head," she replied, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't just about you anymore. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, I saw Frank's shadow outside the window, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Then I remembered the recording devices hidden throughout the house, the FBI agents waiting for the signal. You're right about one thing, Susan, I said, my voice steady. This isn't just about me. It's about stopping you from hurting anyone else, including that baby. Her expression shifted, eyes narrowing dangerously. You really think you can take me down? You're just a washed-up old man trying to play hero. Funny, coming from someone who hides behind murder and deceit, I replied, my resolve strengthening. You've underestimated me, and it's going to cost you. The door swung open again, and in walked Frank, a reassuring presence. The tension in the room ratcheted up as the FBI agents, who had been waiting outside, moved in swiftly, surrounding Susan and cutting off any escape. FBI, Susan Clark, one of them announced, brandishing his badge. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and multiple counts of fraud. The room exploded into chaos. Michael and Rachel looked at Susan in shock, their faces pale as the reality of their situation sunk in. I told you this was going to end badly, I said, stepping back to allow the agents to do their work. You chose the wrong family to mess with. As I stood there, I felt a mixture of emotions, anger for what had been done to me and to baby Thomas, sadness for the lives lost because of greed, and a flicker of hope for the future. Michael and Rachel were taken to the side, handcuffed and visibly shaken. They had trusted Susan to orchestrate their plans, believing they could outsmart everyone. Now they were facing the consequences of their actions, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice for the victims of Susan's operation. Danny walked over to me, a satisfied smile on his face. You did good, Adrian. This will be a major bust for us. With Susan's confession, we can unravel her entire network. Thank you, Danny, I replied, gratitude filling my voice. I couldn't have done this without your help, but we can't forget about baby Thomas. The agents had already arranged for Thomas's safe transfer to a custody facility where he would be cared for until a more permanent solution could be found. I knew I would fight for him, to give him the loving family he deserved, and to ensure he knew the truth about his birth mother, Sarah Collins. As the agents prepared to leave, I took one last look around my old house. It was just a building now, stripped of its warmth and memories, but it would serve as a reminder of betrayal and resilience, of love and loss. Later, I sat in the back of a police car, watching as the sun began to set over Chesapeake Bay. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped my life for so long. I felt a sense of closure wash over me, knowing that justice was being served. The trial was set to begin in a few weeks. I would testify against Michael, Rachel, and Susan, and I was ready to tell my story. I wanted the world to know what they had tried to do and the lengths they had gone to steal my life. As the car pulled away, I closed my eyes and thought of baby Thomas. I would find a way to bring him home with me, my grandson, my family. This time, I would protect him at all costs. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when I was pushed into the cold waters of Chesapeake Bay. I sat at the dining table of my new home, watching as my grandson, baby Thomas, now a spirited 5-year-old, played with his toys in the living room. The warmth of the sunlight streaming through the windows filled my heart with joy. Each day, I made it a point to tell Thomas the story of his birth mother, Sarah Collins, who had shown incredible courage. I wanted him to know that he was loved and cherished because of her bravery. I hoped to instill in him the values of love, compassion, and the importance of family, a stark contrast to the betrayal I had once experienced. As we sat down for dinner, I looked at the smiling faces around the table, Frank, Dorothy, and Thomas. It was a family I had fought hard to create, built on love and trust rather than greed and deceit. These were the people who stood by me, who offered their support when I needed it most. Remember, Thomas, I said, leaning closer to him. Family is not just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love you and protect you. In the end, my journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Through the betrayal I faced, I learned that true strength lies in our ability to forgive and to rebuild. Our experiences shape us, and even the most painful grandpa stories can become sources of wisdom and inspiration. Remember, betrayal can lead to unexpected paths of growth and healing. Faith has been my guiding light, reminding me that there is always a higher purpose at play in moments of doubt. I've turned to prayer, asking for guidance and strength. When we trust in God, we find the courage to confront our challenges and emerge stronger than before. I encourage you to share your own grandpa stories and reflections on betrayal. Join the conversation by leaving a comment below. And don't forget to share this video with others who may need encouragement. Together, let's create a supportive community that uplifts each other. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt content, and let's continue this journey of hope and healing together. Your story matters.